Okay, hybrid class. Here's this week's lecture is going to be a little bit different. As you can see, you're sitting further back. I'm going to be doing a couple of examples of manuscript readings here in a few minutes. I want to make sure that you can see the whole thing. All right. So let me go over your grading for your manuscripts reading first of all. You'll be doing those in class on Monday, which should be the 18th, I think. So the first thing is it's going to be worth 25 points. Vocal delivery is going to be worth 5 points. And again, all I really want to see, I'm not looking for an Oscar caliber performance. I'm just looking to for you to show some vocal emphasis and put some effort into the vocal delivery. Not just stand up here, just, you know, as the example I've used over and over again. You know, once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary. Okay, show me that you've read it, that you understand it, and that you put some effort into it. Second will be eye contact. Okay, that's 5 points. If you remember from our class on methods of delivery, reading a manuscript is still public speaking. It's not staring down at the page endlessly. You need to look up and you need to make eye contact with your audience and show them that you care that they're there. Okay? Third, gestures. That's going to be 5 points. Remember, don't touch the lectern. Get your hands off the lecterns, have them out so you can gesture effectively, okay? And I'll show you how to set your papers up and everything in just a second. But make sure your hands stay off this lectern. If you grab that lectern and hold on to it for the full 3 to 4 minutes, you're going to wind up losing points, okay? Finally, is time. That's going to be worth 10 points. Remember, the time limit is 3 to 4 minutes. 2 minutes and 59 seconds, unfortunately, is going to get you a 0. If I say hit 4 minutes and 1 second and you're still talking and I say time, that's also going to be a 0. Do this for a very specific reason. The point of this exercise is to give you, prove to you that if you practice, you can make something more fit in the time you want it to. There's no easier way to do that than to have a fixed script. And if you practice at all, even 4 or 5 times, you should know how long it's going to last. Okay? So let's get all that down. Now, this is going to be a little different than your impromptu speech. With your impromptu speech, you got a 5 or a 0. Okay? Because remember, all I ask you to do for the impromptu speech is to come in, stand here, okay? I ask you to stand here. I ask you to speak. I timed you. And then I ask you to have an introductory statement, some content, and then a restatement of your purpose. Okay? For 3 of those, you either stood like this or you didn't. It was a 0 or a 5. For vocal delivery, you spoke or you didn't. Okay? It was a 0 or a 5. For time, you came in between 2 and 3 minutes or you didn't. It was a 0 or a 5. Now, you could state your purpose, state your content, not restate your purpose at the end. That's 3 out of 5. Well, now, for all of these, for these 3, vocal, eye contact, and gestures, if you gesture a little bit, if I get just a couple of these every once in a while, okay? If I get you making eye contact by looking up and looking around, and it not being fluid and not being constant or not being continuous throughout the process, you get a 3 out of 5, okay? For vocal, I need to, if you put some effort into it, but it doesn't really come across that you're familiar with the piece or fluid with the piece, then it's possible you could get a 3 out of 5, okay? But remember, again, the big thing here is time. Time is going to be 10 points. Time is going to be an all or nothing. I did it one time, if you went to 2:45, I gave you 6 points, but then I had somebody that came in and said, well, I got to 2:44, why don't I get 6? So I just decided to cut it off. There is no excuse for you not knowing exactly how long this is going to take up here. Okay? All right. So, here's my first piece. I know you can't see this very well, but it's on 3 separate sheets of paper. Okay? It's 16-point font. I would recommend you using at least 14-point font. Do not bring a book in here, even if it's like 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish. Because if you have a book up here, it's going to have a tendency to fall closed, and you're going to have your hand on the book all the time. Also, if you want to do something like Dr. Seuss or a children's book, there's very few words on each page, and you will wind up flipping pages constantly, and that's going to keep you from gesturing and getting your full points for gestures. Okay? Again, any book is also going to be much smaller than 14.5. I would recommend you retype it and keep it separately. So what I do is when I get up here, I take my first page, and if you've got more than 3 pages, I would number them. So you don't, if you drop them, or you don't get lost. I take my first page, I set it on the left-hand side of the lectern. I take my second and third pages and sort of stagger them so that I can get at them very quickly when I need to change pages. I don't let them hang off the edges of the lectern, okay? All right? And then as I read, I get down to the bottom, toward the bottom of the first page, and I can immediately go to my second page is already exposed. I get about halfway through the second page, and I move it over so I can read the third page, okay? I need you only to get up here and state the name of your piece and the author. If you're doing 2, you will do them both as you get to them. My first piece that I'm going to do here is 2 poems, okay? So this is how you would, and again, remember with poems, we don't read to the end of the line and stop. We read them fluidly like if they were written in straight sentence format. These are 2 poems. I've edited them. If you can see, let me bring this up here so you can see it. I've actually edited it so that I've taken all the line breaks out of it so it makes it easier for me to read the poetry. Okay? So I stand up here, I put my papers on, I take a little step back so I'm not tempted to get my hands on it, and I start. 2 poems from modern life. The first, My Mother Wants to Know If I'm Dead, by Kristen O'Keefe Aptowitz. Are you dead? Is the subject line of her email. The text outlines the numerous ways she thinks I could have died. Slain by an axe murderer, lifeless on the side of a highway, choked to death by smoke since I'm a city girl and likely didn't realize you need to open the chimney flue before making a fire. And if you do happen to be alive, here's a link to a YouTube video on fireplace safety that I should watch. Mom muses about the point of writing this email. If I'm already dead, which is what she suspects, I wouldn't be able to read it. And if I'm alive, what kind of daughter am I not to write her own mother to let her know that I've arrived at my fancy residence, safe and sound, and to immediately send pictures of everything like I promised her? If this was a crime show, she posits, the detective might accuse her of sending this email to cover up for murder. How could she be the murderer if she wrote an email to ask her daughter, asking if she was murdered? Her defense lawyers would argue at the trial. In fact, now that she thinks of it, this email is the perfect alibi for murdering me. And that is something I should definitely keep in mind if I don't want to write her back as soon as I have a free damn second. Survey of Morale by Carrie Shippers. We notice participation is decreased, though whether due to layoffs or malaise, we can't be sure. While the survey is anonymous, if you fill the comment boxes with "these questions suck" or "stop wasting my time," we probably know who you are, especially if you mentioned your division, duties, and job description. Even more if you signed your name. We're also dismayed by demands for better leadership. While you're welcome to select somewhat or not at all in response to, do you find management effective? We'd like you to imagine how that makes us feel. And we're sorry you're suffering, but we doubt work caused your divorce. Perhaps it was insensitive to ask which of your coworkers are seeking other jobs, but we really need an estimate. If you left that question blank, it's not too late to pass along some names. The news isn't all bad. Even with the increased copays and deductibles, our health plan is a hit, especially those with anxiety, depression, and insomnia. And although we can't eliminate the long waits while contacting HR, you can now turn off the music while on hold. Widespread raises are impossible, but we've found funds for better toilet paper and ice cream once a month. In the coming weeks, a new task force will form to brainstorm future questions as well as cost-effective ways to ease, if not eradicate, your pain. Though we're aware of some survey fatigue, this instrument was too expensive not to use. The next window for feedback opens soon. We'll keep asking what you think until you change your answers. Okay, so I'll read another one in a little bit. But right now, we're going to jump into lecturing. Okay? And today's lecture will be on evidence. So I don't expect you to be an expert on everything we're going to be talking about in class. Never happened. I understand that. As you go through life, you're not going to be an expert on everything you talk about even there. Like, you're going to need to cite evidence. And today we're going to be talking about why you do that, when you do that, how you do that, what you use for evidence. It's okay? Excuse me. Let me get my beverage. Okay? Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm also going to take the opportunity to move the camera forward so that you guys can better see what's on the board or what I'm projecting here. See how that looks. Okay, let's tilt that up just a bit. Okay. I'll even turn some lights out so it'll jump out even more. Okay. Alrighty then. Let's get started. We cite evidence for several reasons. The first is clarity. By clarity, we mean it makes things clearer, makes things more precise, it makes things easier to understand. If you're using vague language because you're not an expert on it and you know that it's most of something and not 78%, then your language isn't going to be as clear. Using evidence allows you specificity and clarity or clearness to your in your speech that will improve the audience's understanding of the speech, and it also improves your credibility. You also use it for credibility. I don't know anything about nutrition. I barely know how to, healthily feed myself. So if I'm going to get up and be talking about nutrition, I'm going to need to cite somebody and identify somebody with more credibility than I have to give evidence. Okay, you can think of names like Michelle Obama, who dedicated her time as First Lady to improving nutrition. You can look at guys like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as being someone who knows a lot about nutrition clearly. Any certain number of professional athletes, who make a living through their physical prowess. All those people would be credible. Okay, if you want to talk about how to make money, you would listen to Bill Gates or Warren Buffett. Those people have credibility, and you can borrow from their credibility. We're going to talk about that again in a second. You want to use it for accuracy because experts know more and can give more specific and more accurate data than you can. Okay, so that if you research it and you think it's a lot and you find out that it's actually 48%, you can honestly say 48%. If you say most, it's also more accurate. Most is 50.01% or higher. If it's 62%, say 62%. Okay? We use it for authority. Again, that goes back to credibility. So it gives you authority in that it allows you to find a source that people respect, and you attach your ideas to those names, and it gives you more, it gives you more credibility, and it gives you a better command of the subject. Like, for instance, you can say, hey, listen, the primary cause of death of Americans under the age of 18 is traffic accidents. Okay, that's just you talking. But if you say, according to the Centers for Disease Control, the primary killers of youth is number one, car accidents. Okay? That has authority. Okay? Same thing. If you don't wear your seatbelt, you stand a much greater chance of being severely injured or killed in a car wreck. The Federal Highway Traffic Safety Administration says that it will be 62% more likely, and I'm going to be saying 62 because that just keeps popping into my mind. The Federal Highway Traffic Safety Administration is a federal agency that does that for a living. Okay, then you take the authority of that federal agency and borrow it for a few minutes. Okay, it gives you currency. All right, I remember taking a class from a guy on terrorism in 2002, and from what we could tell, he hadn't updated his lectures in over 10 years. Okay, and certainly that post 9/11, all the international terrorism stuff, it had not been updated. He was not current, relying on his own data. If he'd gone out and researched, he would have been much better prepared to talk to us. You may, even if you're a researcher and even if you're an expert, somebody else may have done a study since your last one. It's too easy to go to Google and find out exactly what the most current data is. And then finally, it gives you vividness. Okay? We can talk all day long about the horrors of war, and we can talk about how horrible, say, World War I was. But it really makes it that much more real when you use the words of a World War I veteran who fought in the trenches. Right now, Peter Jackson, who did all the Lord of the Ring movies and produced all and directed all those movies, has a documentary out called They Shall Not Grow Old. It's about World War I. And he updated all the film, but he doesn't use any narration. He uses the words of the actual World War I veterans, and it makes it incredibly powerful because it is incredibly vivid. Okay? So why do we use evidence? It gives us clarity, credibility, accuracy, authority, currency, and vividness. So let's look at when we use it. First of all, we use it is when the speaker has low credibility. And that's not because people hate him or he's a known liar or she's a known liar. We use it when people don't know you. People don't know you, but they know Lindsey Graham, senator from South Carolina. They know Chris Pine, if you want to talk about movie acting. They know Kim Kardashian, if you want to talk about social media businesses. Okay? These are people that have more credibility because they're better known than you. Now, if you've got documentation, if you can have somebody introduce you and show that you have advanced degrees and all these things, hey, that's great. Okay? But that doesn't happen in all cases. So a lot of times, in order to improve our own credibility, we borrow the credibility from somebody that's more studied. Okay? The second thing is we use it to sustain attitude changes over a longer period of time. Vic McGinnis can get up here and talk all day long, and people go, "Yeah, sure." And then a couple of days later, literally a couple of days later, they're going to go, "No, who was that guy that came in here the other day and talked about about adopting dogs? I don't remember." But if I get up here and if I can attach the names of very famous people who have high credibility, okay, they don't remember Vic McGinnis. They remember that, oh yeah, he said that, I'm struggling, pick a name. He said that, Tom Brady or Ron Gronkowski likes this. He supports this idea. Okay? Wow, okay. He said that LeBron James supports this idea. Okay? Cardi B is all over this. All right? And they'll remember that name. They won't remember yours, but that's okay. You're here for the attitude change, not for the publicity, so to speak. Okay? I know we're flying through this really fast, but because you have the ability to stop, back up, re-listen to it, we're going to keep moving. All right? All right, so let's talk about how you use evidence. First of all, number one, cite the qualifications of who you're using as a source. Believe it or not everybody may know who Dwayne Johnson is. So if you're talking about how to produce a great movie, you can get up here and say, "Hey, listen, you need action, you need relationships between people, and you need conflict." Well, that's just you talking, and you may like movies, but that doesn't make you an expert. You can say, "Hey, according to Dwayne Johnson, you need action, you need relationships, and you need conflict." Well, some people may not know who Dwayne Johnson is. So you say, according to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who has starred in over 15 movies that grossed over $750 million each, you need action, you need relationships, and you need conflict. If you state his credentials, as his movies have made a total of over $16 billion, okay, that way they know that the source you're quoting is credible. Use specific evidence. Don't say most families when you can say 62%, because again, most is 50.01%. 62% is significantly more than that. Okay? Then finally, use unfamiliar evidence. Okay? So everybody's seen the stamps on the side of cigarette packs. Smoking will kill you. Smoking causes cancer. Smoking can cause, pregnant mothers smoking can cause all sorts of problems. Okay, we've all seen and heard that. In fact, we've seen it and heard it so much to where if it was actually going to keep people from smoking, everybody would probably have stopped smoking already. Well, a couple of years ago, I was driving down Highway 19 in West Florida, and I saw this billboard. It said, if you've got a 2-pack-a-day habit and you stop smoking, in 3 years you could buy a new fishing boat. Had a big picture of a bass boat. So, wow, I've never thought of. That's something I've never thought of before. Go down a couple of miles further and said, if you smoke a pack a day and you quit, in less than a year you could afford a new set of tires. Had a picture of a truck. If you smoke, and then there was another one that said, if you smoke a pack and a half a day and quit in a year, you could fly to Cozumel for a 10-day vacation. Okay, that was something we had not heard before. Okay, it was unfamiliar, and it caught a lot of people's eyes and created a lot of buzz down in Florida and got that non-smoking conversation back into the public eye, unlike it would if you were just showing more pictures of dead lungs, that kind of thing. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is, what evidence do you need to use? There's 3 types of evidence that we're going to talk about. Okay. The first is going to be opinions. Now, there's 3 types of opinions. There's expert opinions. Now, an expert opinion is someone who's an acknowledged, smart person on a topic. Okay. I was watching Stephen Colbert the other night, and Bill Gates was on there. Bill Gates said, hey, listen, billionaires are not taxed enough and need to be taxed at a higher rate. Well, that's not a fact, that's an opinion. But it's a good opinion, because if there's anybody that's an expert on being, a billionaire, it's the second richest man in the world, Bill Gates. Okay? So his opinion carries weight. All right? An expert opinion. Dr. Mahan, the president of Aiken Technical College. If you quote him on, something about the technical college system of South Carolina, he's an expert. That's what his job is. Okay? If you quoted me on public speaking, I've been teaching this for 30 years, and you cite my qualifications, my opinion is an expert opinion. Okay? Second type of opinion, a lay opinion. Now, you may have heard of lay preachers in your church, or a layman who, can you put that in layman's terms? A layman is not an expert, but is sort of the everyday guy that has an opinion on something. Now, would you rather have expert opinions or lay opinions? Well, it depends on what you're doing. If you're talking about the impact of something the impact that something's going to have on everyday families or everyday people, you want to talk to an everyday sort of guy. You see this all the time on the local news, where you go to the anchor desk, and there's a Bob Hairdo doing the news, and he's going like, gas prices again surged forward today as the price of a barrel of crude oil jumped $15. That's going to cause an increase at the pump of around 13 cents a gallon. We're going out to our field reporter at a local Shell station to talk to people about how that's going to impact their lives. And then you cut, and there's a guy sitting in his car with the window rolled down, and you see that, and the microphone is stuck right in his face, and he's sitting there going, well, yeah, 13 more cents a gallon is going to cost me a lot of money, because I already spend about $100 a week on gas, and if I have to spend another $25 a week, that's going to have a big impact on my budget. Okay? There's a bread shortage in the United States right now because wheat crops are failing. Let's go to your local supermarket. Hey, how are you doing without bread? Okay? Local news does that all the time. That's the bread and butter of local news, is they get local people on the TV to express an opinion. Okay? So we've got expert opinion, we've got lay opinion, and the third one is public opinion. We usually see public opinion in the form of public opinion polls. Okay? That's the constant. A couple of things need to know about public opinions. Number one, there's 330 million people in the United States. To get a national public opinion poll, they usually only interview about 1,500 people. So the results can be horribly skewed. Those people are picked at random without a regard for ethnicity, gender, age, income, anything. So if you've got 1,500 people that happen to pick up the phones, or a bunch of grumpy old dudes, that's going to skew your results. So number one, Survey, the sample size is very small. Number two, public opinion can change very quickly. Before the State of the Union address, President Trump had a public approval rating of 37%. Okay, asked, do you approve of the president's jobs performance? Only 37% would say yes. A week later, okay, his poll numbers, because of the State of the Union, because of a couple of other things, his poll numbers had jumped 44 to 44%. That's a 7-point swing in under a week. Okay, so public opinion can change very quickly. Third thing, the public can be stupid sometimes. Okay, in a survey, when asked, a majority of Americans, and again, that's not a specific figure, so I'm killing myself here, but a majority of people said, responded to the question, do you feel having undocumented aliens, or illegal aliens, in your neighborhood increases the likelihood there will be crime? Most Americans answered yes. Factually, that's not true. Undocumented aliens commit crime significantly at a significantly less rate than people that are born in the United States. Okay, so really, if you're living around a bunch of native-born Americans, you've got a higher chance of crime than if you're living in a neighborhood that's made up solely of undocumented aliens. Okay, sometimes, so remember with public opinion polls, sample sizes are small, public opinion can change fairly quickly, and then sometimes the public doesn't know what they're talking about. Yeah, and if somebody who comes back later to counter-persuade can bring up actual facts as opposed to public opinion, you could be in trouble. Okay? Second thing we're going to use is statistics. Now, here's a couple of things you need to be very careful of about statistics. If you don't know, if you say the statistical mean or median or average, you better know what that word means. Because there will be statisticians in the audience who will look at your figures and stick their hand up and go, you keep saying the median, but I think you mean the mean, and then you look like you don't even know what you're talking about. Okay? 2, so know what statistics you're using. 2, round statistics off when possible. Okay? 62.6%, you could say 63%. It sounds better. If you're saying 62.6%, could you round it up to 65%? Sure. You can probably get away with that. But then if somebody comes along and sees 65%, are they going to round that up to 70? Yeah, now you're clearly not being ethical when it comes to it. Okay? So round your figures, but be conscious of it. Like the federal deficit this week went over $22 trillion. Now, if I'm giving a speech on the federal deficit, and if I said, the federal deficit this week hit $22,648,379,128,364.28. And I said that every time I wanted to bring that figure up, I would do nothing in a 6-minute speech except repeat that number 3 times. So rounding it to $22 trillion just makes sense, and it makes it easier for us to understand. Okay. Last thing. Use statistics in a concrete manner. The Air Force is buying a new bomber. It's called the B-21. These bombers are probably going to cost about $1.1 billion an airplane. Okay? $1.1 billion. Well, how much is $1.1 billion? I don't know. It's $1,100,000,000. I know that, but that doesn't mean anything to me. What if I told you if the Air Force did not make one of those bombers, you could build 1,000 schools, which is approximately correct. Okay, because $1 billion is 1,000 million. And if you can build a school for $1 million, you can build 1,000. And that's a really nice school, by the way. Okay, so if I walked into the class and I said, hey, if you're wondering about how much $1.1 billion is, we could build 1,500 elementary schools for one aircraft. Okay, suddenly that gets people's attention. Everybody understands what a school is. What about 1,500 schools? All right? So if I said $1.1 billion, do you realize what that means? That means that we could give everyone in the United States, $300 if we didn't build one of those airplanes. I don't know what the figures are. It could be higher, it could be lower. I don't know. But you see how I'm making it concrete. Okay? Then finally, the last thing we're going to use is facts. Facts are things that are provable in real time and real space. Okay, So if somebody says there's 578 miles of wall between on the Mexico-U.S. border, I can go out and I can measure it. I can prove or disprove that statement. Okay? Now, if you say 20% of the border is fenced, that's now a statistic. Okay? So a compilation of facts can make it a statistic. Facts are great. Facts are really good to have because they are indisputable. Okay? Which is better, facts, statistics, or opinions? We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Oh, and I just got an email from my wife. That's what's down in the bottom corner over there. Okay? All right. So where do we get evidence from? Well, there's your personal knowledge. I had a student last semester that was talking about prisons. Her informative speech was just not good. Didn't get a very good grade either. So she came in and said, hey, listen, why didn't I get a good grade? And I said, well, because really you didn't seem to know what you were talking about. I mean, you quoted some sources and everything else, but nobody had any real reason to engage you on this topic. And she said, well, what if I told you that I'd been in prison for 5 years and just got released for 6 months ago? And I went, do you mind telling people that? And she goes, no, not really. I don't bring it up early on, but I don't hide it. And I said, well, then your personal knowledge, you are the subject matter expert in this room on prison systems. Okay? You have knowledge. I'm hoping when you're looking at your informative, your problem solution, and your persuasive speech that you're picking a topic that you find engaging, that you already have knowledge of, and not picking something off a wall. Okay? If you have personal knowledge, use that. Now, then I go back and I say this. Because part of the academic exercise here in doing speeches is that you learn how to cite evidence. Your personal knowledge is not going to be used as one of your 3 sources for your informative speech. Okay? But it will make it a better speech, and that will improve your grade. Okay? So then we have primary research. Primary research is from somebody who actually did experiments or wrote down something. Primary research would be if I said there are 3,784 trees on the Aiken Technical College campus. Primary research would have me going out and counting trees. Okay? And then if somebody went out and counted trees on all 8 campuses of the Technical College system of South Carolina, those 8 numbers, 3,748 at Aiken Technical College, 3,218 in Columbia, 284 in Charleston, okay? That would all be primary research. If then somebody comes in and says there's an average of 1,248 trees on each campus in the South Carolina Technical College system, that is secondary research. That is somebody taking primary research and extrapolating from it. Summarizing it, breaking it down, combining it with other information. Okay? If you wanted to write a paper about George Washington, you could go to Wikipedia and look up George Washington, or you could go back and look at George Washington's letters, his journals, things that he actually wrote. His letters, his journals, things he wrote are primary research. His Wikipedia entry, secondary research. Okay? Which is better? Well, I'm never going to go and find out how big the sun is. I don't have the expertise to do that. I have to take somebody else's word for it. Okay? Queen Victoria, who reigned as the Queen of England for 60 years. From the time she was 18 till the time she died in her 80s, she kept a journal every day. There's tens of thousands of pages of them. I'm never going to read all of those. Okay, I've seen them. They're online if you go to the British Archives. But I'm never going to read them. So if I'm going to look at something about Queen Victoria, I'm going to go to a secondary source. Okay. It would be better if you went to use personal knowledge, then primary research, and then secondary research. But secondary research is perfectly okay. Okay? Now let's hit some guidelines for how to use evidence. First of all, use a variety of evidence source types. If you get up here and you just don't do anything but quote statistics all day long, Okay, statistics, 62%, 53%, 44%, 1,478, 200. About halfway through your speech, you're going to have people sleeping on their desks. Okay? So use personal knowledge, use expert opinion, use statistics, use secondary, use primary, use a variety of sources. Okay? Choose appropriate forms of evidence. Remember I talked to you earlier about how if you're going to expand the Aiken Regional Medical Center, the medical director is talking today to a bunch of bankers. What kind of evidence is he going to use? He's going to use a ton of statistics. Going to be a lot of numbers. Okay? Percentage of beds that are empty on a daily basis. How many people that live in South Carolina go to the hospital over in Augusta? How much money will we get per bed when we fill all those beds? How much extra cash flow is that going to give us? Okay. He comes out tomorrow to speak to a nursing class because he's going to need to hire these people to staff his new medical wing. He's going to be telling a lot of narrative stuff. Last week we had a 6-year-old come in. He's going to be talking about quality of life issues, work-life balance. He's going to be talking about salaries. Completely different, and how they compare to the average salaries for nurses in South Carolina. Completely different set of evidence. Make sure your evidence is relevant. So if I'm standing in front of an Aiken Technical College campus class or group, and I'm quoting a study that was done on 65-year-old males, and I look around the class, somebody sticks their hand up and says, yeah, your research has to do with 65-year-old males, and there's no 65-year-old in anything in this class. Yeah, you're done. You don't have any relevant evidence to give them. Okay? So really all you can do is go, yeah, okay. If you can't link that research you have to these people, then you don't have any evidence that's real. If it's not relevant, it's not useful to them. Okay? Don't use too much evidence. Remember, you're public speaking, and the reason we public speak is to communicate. It's a dialogue. If all you're doing is reading something that somebody else said, people will begin to wonder, why are you even up there? Why can't we just get all those somebody else's to come in and say it? Okay? So make sure you use your own expertise and speak to them as a person, not just as somebody who's reading somebody else's evidence. Then finally, don't ever manipulate your evidence. Okay? Don't ever do that. It's the easiest thing in the world to do. And it will do it. If you get caught out, okay, you will look stupid and you will be done. One of my jobs in the Department of Defense and in the Army was to give briefings to senior officers. And I would see guys that would be up there and I'd be in the briefings and they'd go clicking through and they say, hey, click. 62% of our enemy forces are blah, 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 blah. Go to the next slide. Then the general, or in one case, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, a foreign officer will go, excuse me, could you go back? Yeah. Where did that 62% come from? And that officer who's standing, or sergeant that's standing up there giving the briefing will go, sir, I don't have any notes on that. I'll have to get back with you. That was just the information that was presented to me. Okay? And then you don't have to worry, especially if you're in a military environment, you don't have to worry about what the boss thinks because they'll say, if you don't know that, you're done. Thank you. I'll take a look at your slides later, and you're out. Okay? So, just be aware of that. So don't ever manipulate your evidence. Okay? Clearly, you guys, I wish you were here. They would ask me questions, but you're not. If you have any questions, we will go over everything on Monday. All right? But you're a small class. We'll have time after reading manuscripts to go over a few things. Okay? I tried to stay on camera most of the lecture today, but I got one more thing I want to do. Okay, I'm going to set my camera back here. All right, make sure I'll still be in the frame. I've got one more manuscript to read to you so that you know how manuscripts are, and I'll give you another example of how that's supposed to go. Okay, remember, I've got mine on 3 pages. I set the pages up so I can move them easily. I will be called up from the back. I will walk up here. I will put my papers down. I will take a deep breath. William Faulkner's acceptance speech for the 1949 Nobel Prize for Literature. I feel that this award was not made to me as a man, but to my work. A life's work in the agony and sweat of the human spirit. Not for glory and least of all for profit, but to create out of the materials of the human spirit something which did not exist before. So this award is mine only in trust. It will not be difficult to find a dedication for the money part of it commensurate with the purpose and the significance of its origin. But I would like to do the same with the acclaim, by using this moment as a pinnacle from which I might be listened to by the young men and women already dedicated to the same anguish and travail, among whom is already that one who will someday stand where I am standing. Our tragedy today is a general and universal physical fear so long and sustained that we can bear it. There are no longer problems of the spirit. There is only one question: when will I be blown up? Because of this, the young man or woman writing today has forgotten the problems of the human heart in conflict with itself, which alone can make good writing, because only that is worth writing about. Worth the agony and the sweat. He must learn them again. He must teach himself that the basis of all things is to be afraid. And teaching himself that, forget it forever, leaving no room in his workshop for anything but the old verities and truths of the heart, the universal truths lacking which any story is ephemeral and doomed. Love and honor and pity and pride and compassion and sacrifice. Until he does so, he labors under a curse. He writes not of love, but of lust, of defeats in which nobody loses anything of value, and victories without hope, and worst of all, without pity or compassion. His griefs grieve on no universal bones, leaving no scars. He writes not of the heart, but of the glands. Until he learns these things, he will write as though he stood among and watched the end of man. I decline to accept the end of man. It's easy enough to say that man is immortal because he will endure. That when the last ding-dong of doom is clanged and faded from the last worthless rock hanging tideless in the last red and dying evening, that even then there will still be one more sound, that of his puny and exhaustible voice still talking. I refuse to accept this. I believe that man will not merely endure, he will prevail. He is immortal, not because he alone among creatures has an inexhaustible voice, but because he has a soul, a spirit capable of compassion and sacrifice and endurance. The poet's, the writer's duty is to write about these things. It is his privilege to help man endure by lifting his heart, by reminding him of the courage and honor and hope and pride and compassion and pity and sacrifice which have been his glory in the past. The poet's voice need not merely be the record of man. It can be one of the props, the pillars to help him endure and prevail.